ES Audio.
Hello, I'm Nick Curtis.
I'm Nancy Durrant.
And I'm Nick Clark.
And this is what's coming up on this episode of the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
From the creators of Matilda the Musical, we review the Olivier Award-winning Groundhog Day at the Old Vic.
Nobody cares what I do. Nobody cares what I'm a highly uninfluential.
Music and lyrics are by Tim Minchin, and Andy Carl is back in the starring role of Phil Connors.
And he's an actor, a stand-up, and he played Eric Morecambe in Eric and Ernie. We'll be joined by BAFTA Award winner Daniel Rigby.
I mean, the inspiration came later, really, from Morecambe and Wise, because I hadn't been that much of a follower slightly before my time. I was aware of them, of course, but I wasn't so much a fan. It was through getting the part and then deep diving on the research that I just realised how completely incredible they were and consummate in what they did.
Daniel is currently starring in Accidental Death of an Anarchist, directed by Daniel Raggett.
Plus, we discuss Romeo and Juliet at the Almeida, directed by Rebecca Frecknall. The play stars Ted Lasso's Toheeb Jimoh as Romeo and Isis Hainsworth as Juliet.
Welcome back to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast. This is our 20th episode.
And welcome back, Nick Clark. Oh my God, I'm so glad you're back.
Yeah, back from holiday. Not much theatre, unfortunately, so not a huge amount for me to discuss.
Well,
but
good to have you back. We missed you in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, we definitely did. And there's a lot that happened this morning.
There is. You've come back to a firestorm of theatre stories. So I'm just back from the National Theatre Press Conference where Rufus Norris, the artistic director, announced a huge raft of very exciting productions, but also, not entirely surprisingly, that he is going to stand down at the end of his 10-year term.
Yeah, I mean, worst kept secret in theatre.
Yeah, we were sort of expecting that.
We were sort of expecting that. I was surprised by how moved I was by that, really. Partly because I've sort of I've reviewed Rufus's work all the way through his career, from very early sort of fringe productions. Interviewed him several times when he took over at the National. I'm personally quite fond of him. I wouldn't say we're mates, but we get on very well when we see each other.
He's a very engaging presence, I think, at these conferences, and he's a really charismatic guy, I think.
Yeah, and I would say he hasn't exactly had an easy ride of it. For a start, COVID, that whole thing. But I think he's done a lot of stuff which was sort of necessary but sometimes difficult. I don't think his artistic choices have always been spot on, though some of them there have been very notable hits over the 10 years. But I think he has successfully sort of shifted the needle of the way we think what the National Theatre is and what it's for.
Yeah, well, I mean, in what way though? I mean, what sort of?
Well, I'm thinking of co-productions. He was talking today about the impact that Black Lives Matter had, and about the idea of representation in the National Theatre.
He's clearly made a shift there. I
think he has. I think he has changed the climate there and made it more sort of accessible, more reflective of the makeup of the nation. And I think particularly the whole co-production idea. With Sheffield theatres, with Liverpool, with Birmingham.
Yeah, just like making it a bit more national.
Making it a bit more national. The clue's in the name. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're really beginning to fly now.
Yeah.
Maybe initially it was a bit, so-so, but I think now you look at Standing at the Sky's Edge and many others, actually.
Absolutely.
Really...
And it was great that he was able to announce this on top of not only a very exciting theatre at the National, but the fact that Standing at the Sky's Edge is going into the West End. The Motive and the Queue is also worst kept secret in the world, is also going into the West End, but with its cast intact, which is just a wonderful thing. There was a lot of warmth in the room for him this morning, I think.
I think one of the things that, speaks to what you were just talking about is the Death of England commissions that he did for Roy Williams and Clint Dyer.
Yeah.
The first one had Rafe Spall in it, and the second one Michael Balogun, and that was brilliant. And now there's a third one coming called Death of England Closing Time, which features two women, Jo Martin and Hayley Squires, playing Denise, who I think must be the Death of England Delroy's character's mum, and Carly, the famous Carly. If you've seen the shows, she's Death of England Delroy's wife/girlfriend and Death of England, Rafe Spall's character's sister.
Yes, that's right.
But wait, so this is the national theatrical universe here.
Yes.
NTU, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that, and that will be, a black woman and a younger white woman, both part of the same family by marriage. and there's been a lot of kind of racial discussion within that family that you would have seen over the previous 2 plays. And I'd really love to see what Clint Dyer and Roy Williams are going to do with that.
Yeah, there's loads of exciting stuff. There's Nye, the new play about Anarian Bevin and the creation of the NHS, which is obviously going to have a lot of attention.
With Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen.
Of course, the obvious.
Yes, only Welsh actors should play Welsh characters like
the
Anarian
only Welsh
Bevin.
actor who's ever allowed to do it.
And now
is
he's
Michael
playing
Sheen.
every single
Absolutely,
Welsh character.
yes. He's probably going to take over from Anthony Hopkins in a few years' time with the older Welsh characters. But Coriolanus is coming in as well.
So excited
starring
about that.
David Oyelowo. That will be really, tempting him back for that. That's such a
Oh
coup,
yeah, that is
really,
a bit of a
for
coup.
the
'Cause he's been
National.
in the States for a long time
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
And also like The Confessions, a new play by Alexander Zeldin, and I love his first one at the National, and then Faith, Hope and Charity I thought was also absolutely brilliant. He's such an amazing playwright, I think.
This one apparently is very personal. It's about
Oh,
his
really?
mother and
Oh,
about
interesting.
how she sort of came over from Australia and built a family and found agency, was the way they described it in the press conference. Again, it's a really diverse, really interesting season. Lots of things that make you go, "Ooh, that'll be fascinating to see." Bernarda Alba, new version by Alice Birch. That's one of the things that Rufus Norris said at the press conference today was that I think it's this season. He said, or maybe the last season. Anyway, 19 of the 21 productions recently had a living writer in the room. So the National has been much more a sort of contemporary writing space.
And I'm really excited about Alice Birch coming in. I mean, she's just been the showrunner on Dead Ringers, where Rachel Weisz played twins.
Yeah.
I think she was involved in Succession at one stage. I mean, not one of the major ones, but she was involved in it.
Yeah.
So, bringing her back, it'll be fascinating to see what she does with this
especially
text.
with the Succession alum Harriet Walter, who's going to be playing Bernarda Alba, which is really
absolutely
exciting. I love Harriet Walter.
I love Harriet Walter. She's absolutely marvellous, it's true. And directed by Rebecca Frecknall, who will be coming to a little bit later when we discuss Romeo and Juliet.
Of course,
and
Frex.
Famous Frex.
Do no wrong. So there's loads more in the season. It'll be up on the National's website if you want to check it there. Loads and loads of stuff.
Yeah,
Exciting. We should mention the very sad news that Glenda Jackson has just passed away.
Yes, it is sad, but it's also, what a life. What an amazing life.
Yeah.
And working right to the end. I mean, her film with Michael Caine is about to come out about the Great Escaper. Not that long ago, she was on stage reprising her King Lear from the Old Vic in New York. Before that, she was doing Three Tall Women in New York.
That was after being out of the industry for 23 odd years.
Absolutely,
as an active MP, just kind of
and then
in theory
came back
saving
and played
the world.
Lear.
Came back and played Lear, yeah. She won the Evening Standard Best Actress Award that year, the Natasha Richardson Award for Best Actress. I interviewed her. She was the most delightful person at the awards ceremony, the easiest in terms of having a photo taken. She turned up in an M&S frock. I think she'd had a fag outside just before coming in, which in the mid-80s is also quite good going. And she was just charming. She had a reputation for not suffering fools gladly. I mean, when I met her then, she really, I just was the most...
Did she suffer you?
She suffered me quite gladly. Whatever that says about me. But I mean, look at that career, starting in the 50s at RADA, having grown up in a working class household in Liverpool, Peter Brook seasons at the RSC, all those, those Ken Russell films, the romantic comedies with George Segal. I mean, it's just an extraordinary career, isn't it? Elizabeth II, Morecambe and Wise, she did everything.
Thank you, Glenda.
Thank you, Glenda. Right, let's kick off the reviews. First up, it's Groundhog Day at the Old Vic. Or I should say, it's Groundhog Day at the Old Vic again. I'm sorry, it's an old gag, but everybody was making all the old gags about this one. This is an adaptation of the famous Bill Murray film. It was staged a couple of years ago at the Old Vic with music and lyrics by Tim Minchin, direction by Matthew Warchus, based on the original script by Danny Rubin. And it was sort of hoped to transfer to the West End, but it went to New York instead. The New York run was cut short, and then it didn't transfer to the West End, and now it's back at the Old Vic. So we are reliving Groundhog Day in much the way that weatherman Phil Connors relives the same day over and over and over again.
Yeah, just to mention, actually, before we start, you can hear our interview with Tim Minchin and Danny Rubin via the link in the show notes. That was with the lovely Nick Clark.
Yeah, it was a terrific interview.
What did you think? I really liked it. I'd forgotten how good it is.
For an essentially light romantic comedy, the film is actually surprisingly deep and surprisingly dark. But I was surprised how much deeper and darker and more thoughtful the musical is, really. Yeah. And that's credit not only to Danny Rubin, but chiefly to Tim Minchin, I think.
I mean... He is really a genius, don't you think? The songs are so clever and so funny. They're really well written in the way that they're very singable, so you can hear all the jokes.
Yes.
You know, and which sounds like a stupid thing to say, but actually it's not always the case. You're always surprised by the next line.
That's very true. It's the way he sort of colours in even fairly minor characters with them. There's the lovely opener of the second act, Being Nancy, sung by the girl who Phil Connors decides to seduce once he realises he can perfect his technique day after day after day. And that's all she is in the film, is that she's the girl he seduces, and that's all she is for the first half here. But then in the second half, she gets this amazing song talking about what it's like to be that character, and then talking about what it's like to be the actress playing that character.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like sort of infinite regret. There's layers and layers and layers of this.
Yeah, it's lovely. And I think, you know what, it's a really perceptive piece of writing by a man from the point of view of a woman who's never needed to kind of find out who she is because she's so attractive until she realises at a point where it feels a bit too late that that's not really enough. I mean, it's not something you see very often, and I think it's really well observed.
Yes,
actually.
I think so. I love the drunk song as well. When he realises there's no sort of payoff, there's no payback. He's not going to get a hangover if he gets drunk.
Oh yeah,
so
in
he
the
gets
bar
drunk
with
in the
those
bar
two
with the
guys.
two guys, and I just love the way they
good.
talk about their lives. And you know, I pee. I usually miss a bit. I usually get a bit on the floor. All this sort of stuff, and you know, you sort of get a peek into the emptiness of their lives and how hard it is.
But it's an indication of what a good observational comedian Tim Minchin is, actually.
Yeah.
He's sort of going back to his roots as a comedian. He's so good.
Yeah.
God, the man's
and
brilliant.
it's also the way he sort of works a joke through to its logical conclusion. That there's, you know, in the film, in the original script, you've got the idea that he seduces Nancy, he then sets out to seduce his producer Rita, and that becomes his purpose in life, and that becomes his redemption arc. That, you know, when he finally becomes a good enough person to win her, that's when he breaks the cycle. But here there's that lovely late song where he says, I've slept with every woman in this town between the ages of 18 and 80, 90% of them between 18 and 84, and then she sings a phrase about it, and then he says, and some dudes when I was bored.
Yeah, exactly. It's just...
Which I just think is...
And it's so thrown away.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it really suggests that he's been there for centuries, possibly now.
God. What I really love, though, it's got a bit of an edge, I think. There's this extended sequence in which he keeps trying over and over again, really quite dramatically, to take his own life. Yeah. Like in so many different ways, and just keeps waking up. And it's horribly funny. Yeah. It's like a bit on the nose.
It's also a great piece of stage magic that he dies on one part of the stage and then pops up somewhere else.
I don't know how they do it.
They do it. I mean, I was watching it when I was aware of what they were doing. I was watching it to try and work out how they're doing it. And then sometimes you can see it, but it's so sleekly done. It's so well directed by Matthew Warchus, you know, that particular sequence. But the whole thing is there's quite a lot of sort of Broadway razzmatazz to it. There's quite a lot of Christmas in it, which was kind of, I mean, it's set in the winter, obviously.
Yeah, so, it's got that vibe,
and
definitely.
It opened on the first hot night of the year in London, so that was kind of weird. But I mean, I just think it's great. It's a great show.
Yeah, I think it really is. And I think the reason it didn't do, I was actually discussing with weirdly, I was having dinner with a New York agent on Tuesday night who happens to be my friend's son, and we were talking about why it might not have done well on Broadway. You know, he said, you know, people he knew had seen it and they really loved it, but it opened at the same time as like Come From Away and Dear Evan Hansen, which was a huge hit, and people just didn't, you know, they don't always have the money to go to see all the things they want to see on Broadway. It was just really bad timing that they all opened at the same time. It's a real shame. But I think I'm so glad it's come back, because I think it really deserves it. I want to say quickly, Andy Carl coming back in the leading role, brilliantly unlikable, but also funny, which is pretty much how Rita describes him. And unlike Bill Murray, actually, he's got a real TV anchor face.
He has,
don't you think?
Yes,
it's just like sort of angular,
he's
kind
got
of like
sort of jock
hardly
American...
handsome.
Yes, that's very well put.
I don't think it's a word, but but it works.
It looks a bit like he's going to grow up to be Fred Ward in later life. I think you're right. There's a certain sort of toughness to his face and a certain ruthlessness. I mean, the joke about him, obviously, is that he's a sort of minor weatherman on a fairly small Pennsylvania network.
Who thinks
he's
that
a
he's
star.
like the biggest star in the world. It's really funny. And he's almost never off stage.
Yes, that's
as
true.
Well. It's a real feat, that performance, I think.
It's a very demanding part. Shout out as well to Tanisha Spring, who plays Rita, the producer. Beautiful singing voice. Again, in the film, you sort of give Rita a free pass because Andy McDowell is so charming in it, but she's barely a character in the film. Whereas here, again, Rubin and Minchin, between them, give her all the backstory you'd want.
They make a rounded female character. Yeah, I think she's really lovely, actually. Also, one other thing, I found the number inserted for Phil's old schoolmate Ned Myerson.
Yes.
Extremely Ryerson. It's extremely moving, actually, and it really took me aback. I'd completely forgotten about it.
Yeah.
They give him this sort of quite sad kind of stalwart really backstory. It really sort of like knocked me sideways, actually. I thought it was really beautiful. It's just one song. It's got so much richness to it.
Yeah, fiendishly clever, that song as well, because it ties together the fact that he works in life insurance but has experienced so much tragedy, and it's very, 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 very smart indeed.
Yeah, it's
really
brilliant.
Smart musical,
it's a show, as I think you said in your review, worth seeing again and again.
I'll say it again. It's worth seeing again and again and again. That's Groundhog Day at the Old Vic.
Right, let's go to the ads.
After that, we'll be joined by actor Daniel Rigby to chat about his role as the maniac in Accidental Death of an Anarchist. Plus, how did he feel about beating Matt Smith and Benedict Cumberbatch for that BAFTA?
Hello, I'm Jamie Parker, and you're listening to the Evening Standard Theatre podcast.
Welcome back to the Evening Standard Theatre podcast. I'm at the Jerwood Space with Daniel Rigby, star of Accidental Death of an Anarchist. So I saw the show at Lyric Hammersmith, absolutely loved it. Just for the audience, tell us a little bit about what Accidental Death of an Anarchist is and what your role is within it.
Accidental Death of an Anarchist is a farce that takes place in a police station. I play a character called the Maniac, who is arrested initially for impersonating a psychiatrist, but seizes on the opportunities presented to him to disguise himself as a judge who's conducting an inquiry into the recent death of an anarchist from the same police station, and manages to get the police to basically incriminate themselves and make them look like absolute fools. It's lots of wigs, lots of funny voices, lots of silly faces for me.
Yeah, it's by Dario and Franca Rame, but it's been adapted by Tom Basden, and it's very, certainly at the Lyric Hammersmith where I saw it, it was very up to the minute with a lot of references to the current problems in the Met. Are you updating it further as you re-rehearse it with new cast members?
Well, the transfer has been so unbelievably quick that we've not really needed to. The tweaks that we made are still relevant. We're making a couple of changes that give a slight nod to the fact that it's a bit of a fancy theatre, and there's royal in the title, so we're having a bit of fun with that. But on the whole, it's pretty much the same. Yeah.
Right, I see. You've been a stand-up comedian as well as an actor in your time. Are you drawing on both skill sets for this performance?
There's a lovely overlap in a way with the part, because the Maniac, it's kind of unique. I can't really think of another play that has a character in it that has the relationship with the audience that the Maniac does.
Yeah.
It's a constant sort of interactive relationship, which does remind me of stand-up sometimes. There's not so much direct address, but there is, the nodding and the winking, and there are occasional intervals where there is a moment or two that the Maniac has with the audience directly, and that does remind me of gigs, that dynamic. So.
Do you no longer perform stand-up? Is this something in the past for you, or do you still occasionally go back and flex those muscles?
Oh, well, I mean, I've not done it for absolutely ages, so yeah, I guess it's in the past.
I see.
At the moment.
It's an incredible physical performance, but also a vocal one. I was really worried for your voice.
Oh, were you?
Through the course of the performance,
Sorry about that.
No, I mean, I got over it. Do you have to sort of pace yourself through the course of it? Because it seemed he is a maniac, and it does seem to exist on a constant pitch of mania.
Yeah. I mean, I did make a rod for my own back with a lot of the choices that I made in the rehearsal room. And I think over the course of a 13-week run, we'll see how it goes. Luckily, I never really had a problem with my voice or my body either. There was never any injury. Hopefully it will last, but it's something that I have to sort of keep an eye on and modulate, because it is delivered at a fever pitch, which sort of feels like it supports the play, doing it at that level.
Yeah.
But it is demanding.
What does it feel like bringing it back? Does it still feel fresh? It's when does the play date from? It's 1970s?
Yeah, it's 1970 that it was written. It's based on a true death of a real anarchist who died in Italy in 1969. Right. And at the time that Fo was originally writing it, Fro and Rame were writing it, the inquest was in the news a lot, and he was updating the play constantly with actual information that was literally being put into newspapers on that day, and then it would go into the show in the evening. And there were riots at the original production and things like that. And I think Tom, by essentially taking a kind of hatchet, because it's funny with something like that was so fluid at its inception, has become over time kind of calcified and made a slight museum piece, and that there's now a text and a translation that people then perform. But Tom has done something brilliant, which is, in a way, been incredibly irreverent and changed it massively. Yeah. I think he said it in an interview recently, which sort of honours the original more than just doing it word for word as an adaptation. It feels massively up to date and fresh. And the timing of it, the fact that the Casey report came out while we were doing the run at the Lyric, which we couldn't have foreseen really, it just feels electric actually, performing that kind of play that packs that kind of punch at a time like this, when it's just so in everyone's mind and everyone's sort of debating about the role of the police, and these scandals are coming out in a kind of factory line from the Met, that it does feel electric.
Do you prefer comedy? Do you feel more at home in comic roles?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
right.
I mean, comedy is my first love, really. I mean, the only reason I ever became a performer was to make people laugh, and because there's no educational route into doing comedy necessarily, but there is to act. You can do an acting course at apply to do an acting course at a drama school. That was why I ended up doing that. So yeah, comedy is definitely the first love.
I have to mention your BAFTA for playing Eric Morecambe in Eric and Ernie. That was Eric Morecambe a sort of inspiration to you? Did he mean something to you? Was it fun to play that role?
Oh, it was enormous fun to play it. I mean, it was terrifying, but it was fun eventually. I mean, the inspiration came later really from Morecambe and Wise, because I hadn't been that much of a follower.
Yeah.
It's slightly before my time.
You're only 40, aren't you? So they asked the way. I mean, I'm in my 50s. I caught the tail end of Morecambe and Wise. So yes, they must be before your time.
Yeah. I was aware of them, of course, but I wasn't so much a fan. It was through getting the part and then deep diving on the research that I just realised how completely incredible they were and consummate in what they did. So yeah, that was a real joy.
And how hard was it to sort of turn him into a person rather than do an impression, or do a sort of do the bits we're familiar with from Eric Morecambe, the shtick?
Yeah, I don't know how conscious I was of. I think the bulk of the work that I tried to do was on voice and body, and finding the physical changes and the vocal changes, finding a way in through that, and the fact that Peter Bowker wrote a brilliant script sort of provided, the character and the other sides to him. So I felt very fortunate to have that as the raw material.
Yeah. Yes, I see. You did beat Matt Smith and Benedict Cumberbatch to that BAFTA, I believe. Have you ever bumped into them at a party and gone, in your face, Cumberbatch?
No, thankfully never tried that. I mean, I could give it a go, see how it went down. Yeah. No, I've not. I have worked with, but I did like a cameo in Will Sharp's film, The Electrical Life of Louis Wayne.
Oh, yes.
And, I saw him again after a long time, but it was very nice to see him, and he's doing quite well.
He's doing all right, I think. I think Matt Smith's not doing too badly either, is he? I don't think.
They're both fine.
Yes, I think they're both fine. Just going back to your sort of theatre acting, this being a theatre podcast, actually looking at your more recent roles, they've been, some of them have had a sort of comedic bent. Obviously, you were Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream. You were Frost in Frost Nixon, playing another real person with a very sort of familiar cadence to his voice and very, very, very familiar manner. But also an award-winning performance as Alan Turing, I see, in Breaking the Code, which was in Manchester, so I didn't catch that, I'm afraid. But how was that then? I know the play, but
I loved
it's quite
doing
a challenge.
It was. I mean, I hadn't seen the play before, and on reading it, I thought, blimey, O'Reilly, like the challenge of doing, because there are parts of it that it sort of jumps about his life in a way that's quite brilliant. Hugh Whitemore, the author, he wrote in a very instinctive way that it's completely non-linear, but you get presented with these scenes from different stages of his chronology that feel very much like the scene you should be watching. So that part of it was great. But the challenge of doing so much mathematical, because he doesn't shy away from the more theoretical mathematics of Turing's life, and there are speeches that are about very complex mathematical ideas, which were really hard to get your head around.
Yes. Yeah. So was it after chunks of Shakespeare and sort of serious drama, was it quite nice to settle back into Anarchist and, as you say, give your comedy chops free rein?
Yeah. Especially something like this, which just feels like a sort of all-out kind of every comedy hat you can put on is at some point it feels like sketch work. It can feel like character work. It feels there's a little touch of stand-up in there. It feels like such a real gift.
Yeah. Daniel Rigby, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Accidental Death of an Anarchist is now on at the Haymarket.
Coming up after this very short break, we'll be reviewing Romeo and Juliet at the Almeida.
Why not give us a follow and a rate in the meantime?
Hi, I'm Marisha Wallace, and you're listening to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. Right now, it's Romeo and Juliet at the Almeida. Nick and I saw this at press night, and do you know what? I loved it. What did you think?
Yeah, I loved it with some reservations.
Oh yeah, obvious.
It's weird how Shakespeare plays come in waves. So we've got a ton of Macbeths coming up. We had a ton of Hamlets a few years back. It's been quite a long time since we've had a major Romeo and Juliet.
There was that one with that boy. What was his name? Off the telly. He's in that show.
Which one?
I can't remember now. Oh, damn it. Richard Madden. Wasn't he in it?
He was in the Branagh one, that's right, a few years back. And then there was meant to be, just before lockdown, Jessie Buckley and...
and Josh O'Connor.
Josh O'Connor show. And they did do the film of that.
Especially for film, they did.
They turned that into a film.
It was rather lovely.
Yeah. So it's been a while since there's been a major one. And this does strike me as a fairly major one. One that makes you see a very, very, very familiar play with very fresh eyes, which is something that Rebecca Frecknall, the director, who you may be aware of through her work on Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club and a small little play called A Streetcar Named Desire, which had a bloke called Paul Mescal in it.
Exactly, and we literally never shut up about her.
Yeah,
so.
But so I mean, it's what she does. Rebecca Frecknall, isn't it? She new mints these very, very familiar texts to us. I mean, the thing I loved about this was that if I think back to the Romeo and Juliets I saw 20, 30 years ago, they were all like 40 years old, and here they are credibly.
They're so young.
They're really young.
They're so lovely and palpably young, like teenagers surging with hormones. And you really care about them. It makes the waste of the whole thing, which I think actually Toheeb Jimoh spoke about in his interview with Nick Clark a couple of weeks ago. They talked to each other, so look at that on the website. It's a really nice piece. It makes that waste so much harder to bear.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. It's played without interval. It's cut, so it only lasts 2 hours. I didn't notice anything missing in the cuts. I didn't feel the lack of anything.
It was funny, I think, because when you've seen loads of them, you do find yourself going, that's how they've shaved off a bit. They do that thing, don't they, where they play some of the scenes, they play two scenes simultaneously.
Yes.
And I imagine it's not like this if you're not in a kind of critiquing headspace, but you do sort of notice that, and you do think about it as a critic. But I actually really like those simultaneous scenes because it gives you a really strong sense of how fast everything's happening.
Yeah.
And also, like, just how easily it's spiralling out of control.
Absolutely. And it is a sense that, I mean, I thought that there's a real sort of looming inevitability to the ending in here. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that things do not end happily for Romeo and Juliet. Because of the speed of this and because of the sort of hectic nature of it, it feels much more inevitable that that's the way they're heading. The overlapping scenes suggested to me that they were almost getting a sort of premonition of bad news that they haven't had yet, each of them about the other. I also think the speed of it sort of suggests something of the madness of youth and the ease with which these young people fall in love and fight with one another.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's what Toheeb was saying in his interview, talking about sort of growing up. He grew up in Brixton and, a time when there was quite a lot of sort of youth violence happening, and it's that thing where if everybody's got a knife, then somebody's going to get stabbed. It happens so quickly and unnecessarily, and it doesn't give anybody any time to diffuse anything, and it's so unnecessarily tragic.
Yes.
I think this production really brings that out, actually, because it is, as you said, actually, in your review, clearly the adults have no idea what the kids are up to. And they're just out there roaming in the streets, like fighting with each other completely, and suddenly the parents are like, I'm sorry, what?
Yes.
What has happened? How has this happened in 3 days?
Although a thought has just come to me, because I thought there's a certain sort of sense that it's a society gripped by madness, and that even the adults are mad, and certainly Capulet, Juliet's father, has an almost hysterical scene where he screams at her about how he's going to force her to marry Paris.
Yeah.
This woman.
And you kind of wonder whether that's grief or...
Yes,
I mean, that's
but
the
it's
only
just
thing
occurred
that
to me
really
as well
worked.
that Juliet is his only surviving child. Maybe
Yeah.
the implication is he's lost grown children rather than...
Oh, maybe,
in this production.
yeah.
That didn't occur to me while I was watching it last night. It's literally just come to me.
Yeah, that's
but,
possible.
Possibly he's working through some other forms of grief.
Yeah, exactly. That is quite a possibility.
It's very stripped back. It's short, it's fast. It's on a pretty much empty stage, which always works at the Almeida because it's such a dramatic space in its own right. The lighting is very clever, I think. There's a great moment where there's a sort of banks of spotlights at the back which are just slowly turned up as the heat is turning up between characters who are about to, to fight on stage.
Yeah.
I did have some reservations about it. I didn't particularly like the use of the Prokofiev music to the 1935 ballet.
It's an interesting choice,
sort of choric
isn't it?
movement.
It's odd. It's such a well-known piece.
Yeah.
Without necessarily people knowing that it is from the Romeo and Juliet
Yes.
ballet. Because it's so well known, it feels not quite earned.
Yes.
Because it took me actually until this morning when I read your piece to realise that I was like, what is that bloody piece? I can't remember. I knew it immediately, but I didn't make the connection.
The only reason I knew was that my brother-in-law walked down the aisle to it at his wedding, totally upstaging his bride. Yeah, he's an actor.
What was it like? I don't know, like a Klingon-themed wedding or something. Absolutely ridiculous.
Like sort of Empire Strikes Back music or something.
Amazing.
But yeah, so I mean, it's odd because I mean, Frecknall, her work is here and is always so fresh.
Yeah.
And so sort of shriven of accoutrements or sort of barnacling of stuff that's
although again you didn't love the drums in Streetcar, to be fair.
Did I not?
Sound...
Yeah, somehow this felt strange. Oh, fair enough. Okay, none of us like the drums in Streetcar. I think I prefer the drums in Streetcar to the Prokofiev in Romeo and Juliet.
Exactly. Although it did work rather well with the movement, and actually there is what you can only describe as contemporary dance in this.
Yeah.
Which can sometimes sound a death knell when someone says it. You can do that very badly, but I thought it was done very well, actually.
Yes, yeah.
The fight scenes and things like that were quite often done in that way.
Yes.
And it gave a sense of drama, I thought. And I know that you did not like the costumes.
I did not like the costumes. I did not like the trousers particularly.
You see, I quite liked them. I thought they were kind of fashion forward. I'm trying to remember how you described it. It was so for I thought, your description.
So something like they look like they're wearing trousers made for shorter people and possibly wearing them backwards.
Yeah, exactly. And I know what you mean, but for me, I thought they were really cool. I think it sort of reflects the absurdity of this may not be why, but I'm slightly kind of over-intellectualising it, but it sort of reflects the absurdity of what contemporary fashions were at the time, but also nods to the kind of, I think for me, the experimentation across gender lines in fashion, the way that young people are starting to dress now. So I really enjoyed it in that respect.
I mean, Toheeb Jimoh looks fantastic in that flouncy sort of
that shirt.
terracotta
That's
shirt.
lovely
That's
silk
really
number
good.
with a frill. It's fab.
But I do think inflicting pop socks and culottes on Isis Hainsworth is a bit worse.
I will grant you they weren't great. I like the idea of it.
Yeah.
But let's talk about them briefly.
Yeah.
Like Isis Hainsworth and Toheeb Jimoh were just brilliant. I loved her stroppiness. The way that she speaks to her nurse is so teenage. She's just like, I'll be there by and by.
Yes,
really cross. And he is just like the sort of, I don't know, he comes across as a sort of young man you'd be heartily relieved to be brought home by your daughter or son.
He starts off very sort of suave, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And very sort of sophisticated and easily seems like the most mature of his gang.
But sweet.
But
as
very
well.
sweet as well. And then he is knocked sideways, and he too is deranged, I think, just by this sudden bombshell of love and all the sort of tragedy that sparks off.
Yeah,
really.
exactly. And his sort of rash act out of grief with the death of Mercutio, murdering Tybalt, and then his response to that, he's appalled at what he's done.
Yeah.
You can really see that. I found them both really quite moving.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to sort of celebrate, but the deaths here are really good.
Oh my God, they're such good
and
deaths.
Particularly the knife deaths are horrible. Juliet's death is really, really powerful.
Yeah,
but there's
the
also
time she takes to summon up the courage to stab herself is so painful.
There's also a sort of juxtaposition here, I think, in that, again, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that Romeo brings a gun to the knife fight with Tybalt, and you see how easy that is for him.
Yeah.
That the knife deaths are hard, but suddenly he's got a gun in his hand, he's on the other side of the stage and he can just
it just
gun someone
does
down.
it. Yeah, exactly. It gives you that one level of separation.
And for all that this is hectic, and I think, sometimes there are times when some scenes feel a little hurried, there are some beautiful moments of quiet and understatement in it. When Romeo and Juliet wake up after their first night together, before she kills herself at the end, there's, I think, a lovely moment of communion with his corpse. I mean, she wakes to find him dying, which is horrible.
Yeah, but it's awful.
There's a lovely
just when she wiggles her foot, and you could hear people in the audience going like, "Oh no!"
Yeah.
It was just really, really sad.
Yeah.
I just want to make a mention of Jack Riddiford as Mercutio. I wasn't sure at first how I felt about. There is something of the young Rick Mayall about him.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
It's
sort
quite
of slightly young ones.
Yes, yeah.
But actually, I think he pulls it off. It's not an easy. It's kind of it's a sort of showboaty role.
Yeah.
And he does it in a showboaty way.
Yeah.
Because Mercutio is a showboaty sod.
Yeah.
But I think it works.
I think it does. And I think, and like you, I had my doubts early on, but I think if the thesis of the production is that the society is mad and deranged in some way, then Mercutio has to be that bit more mad and a bit more sexually obsessive and,
Yeah. I think it's a really, really excellent production of this play. I was dreading it a bit because it's so bloody sad.
Yeah.
But I was really glad to have seen it.
Yep.
And that's it for this week's Theatre Podcast.
Thanks to our guest this week, Daniel Rigby. You can find all our interviews just below this episode, such as with Eddie Izzard, Jamie Parker, Cato Flynn, and many more.
You can find all our reviews and news online at standard.co.uk. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode.
And thank you as always to our producer, Rachel Abbott.
We'll see you next week.